Hey everybody, it's Casey here at Zero and Fly and Tackle. Today I'm going to show you how to fish for our local lakes. So I'm out here at Como Lake today. I'm just going to kind of give you guys a rundown on a bunch of the different techniques that we can use to fish our local lakes. And this is something that we get asked about all the time in the shop. So I'm here at Como Lake, real close to the shop, you know, a block and a half away from the front door of the store here. So a lot of our customer base comes out to the lake, and we get lots of people coming in asking all the time, you know, where can I learn more about this? How can I get some more information on fishing our local lakes? So here I am. Gonna go over three sort of the main three types of ways that I would approach a lake like this. Now, Como Lake, it's a man-made body of water. It was kind of a low spot in Coquitlam here, kind of always been a little bit marshy, a little bit boggy, and they dug it out years and years ago. And now it just kind of holds water, and the Freshwater Fishery Society of BC stocks this lake a few times a year. So typically in the springtime, we'll see the lake get stocked. During the summer, just because it's such a shallow lake, a small body of water, it heats up to a level that, you know, putting fish in here isn't going to be all that productive. And then they do it again in the fall once things kind of cool off a little bit. So great place to take the family fishing, you know, because if you want to just kind of hang out for the day somewhere close by, you can by all means come out to a lake like this. You know, there's also Lafarge Lake as well. But once things start warming up, especially in the summertime, or, you know, if it's been a little bit since the lake's last been stocked, not a bad idea to head out to one of our bit larger bodies of water like Bunsen, Sassamat, Raleigh Lake, for example, all stocked by the Freshwater Fishery Society as well. And they'd be other great options to go check out. And these techniques that I'm showing you will transfer to those bodies of water, or really any body of water in BC if you want to target rainbow trout in our lakes. So hang out with me, show you a few different techniques, and hope you get something out of this. All right, so as far as equipment goes, I'm just going to use a basic spinning setup here. Nothing super fancy, or doesn't have to be anything fancy. Something that's going to be an appropriate size for the type of fish that we're fishing for. So these stock trout, you know, nothing massive as far as size scale goes, but still a lot of fun to fish for. So I'm using one of my lighter spinning setups, and I'm going to show you initially how to float fish. Float fishing will be the most common technique that you'll see people use out here, and probably the one that most of you are most familiar with. If you want to see how to set up any of these rigs that I'm talking about, you can see them on our YouTube channel. I've done videos with Andrew showing you how to rig these setups up, so I'm going to skip that part. If you need to get a rundown on how to set your whole line and rod setup for this type of fishing, we'll link these videos in the description below. So basically, we're going to be float fishing. Got my float on there, my small bait hook, and there's a number of different types of bait that I can use. Popular ones being live dune worms. Those are always a really good bet for fishing in these local stocked bodies of water. Krill is another really good bait. Krill is just a small sort of shrimp. They work very, very well. They smell, look good to the fish. Cooked and dyed salmon eggs. These are definitely one of my favorites for these local bodies of water. We've got them in a number of different colors at the shop, orange and red, pink as well, all good options to give a try. And our most popular being power bait. These being the floating eggs. The paste works very well too. I recommend having a couple of different types of baits when you're out doing this type of fishing. Power bait is an awesome one to keep in the tackle box. You don't have to worry about keeping it refrigerated or anything like that. It's not going to spoil throughout the season, and works very well. So trout are very attracted to bright colors, and they like the scent in this stuff. It smells very similar to what they feed them in the hatchery. Quite often I'll mix my baits. You know, I could put on a half a piece of a worm and a floating power egg, or, you know, a krill and an egg. But always good to have some choices. Like I always tell people, you know, sometimes I get tired eating French fries and I want to switch to chicken wings. Same thing with fish when it comes to bait. So to start with, I'm going to take one of my power eggs. And they come all connected in the jar here. I'll take one egg off. And all I'm going to do is, I got my little hook here, is I'm going to thread that egg through. And I'm just going to pull it up the line a little bit. Up around the eye, just to expose that hook point. So when the fish comes, it grabs that and he's going to bite that hook. We don't have to worry about that being hidden on him and not being able to get him. So I've got my float or my line cast out into the water here. We're waiting to see that float get taken under the surface by a fish that's biting on the end of our line there. And basically what we'll do at that point is we're going to set the hook, and hopefully we're going to have a nice fish on the end of our line. What can happen in the meantime while we're waiting for that to happen is that wind will start to blow our line down the water or in towards us, and we'll get some slack line laying in the water. And what I like to do is just reel in that slack every once in a while, just tighten things up to my float a little bit, just so I'm ready when a fish does bite. I don't have to reel in 15 feet of slack, waste a few seconds, and potentially miss my bite. So if I keep my line tight, I can set the hook whenever that float goes down. What I would recommend doing is if you've made a few casts and you're not getting any bites, by all means move around the lake, but before I would do that, I would change my depth. So I would either try going, if I'm not on the bottom, I can move my float down a foot or foot and a half, fish that way for another 15-20 minutes, see if anything happens there, or I can try fishing even shallower and fishing a little bit closer to shore as well. I can find that can really help entice a bite, or just get in front of where the fish are in the water. So as we reel that slack in, and or if the wind is blowing our float in closer to shore, what's going to happen is we're going to be covering different depths as that comes closer and closer to us. So one of the hardest things to do is, if you do catch a fish, is trying to kind of remember that zone that bite took place. Why you want to remember that is that's a good indication of where those fish are hanging out. So we want to try and recreate this each time we cast out there. So better to cast it out a little bit too far than not far enough. Like I said, that float will work its way in, but just try and make a mental note. If you see that float starting to do anything funny, you're starting to go down, try and, if you can find a waypoint, I'm in line with that log or the front door of that house, and that will that should help recreate the success that you just had. And I am getting a bite right now as I'm filming this. Oh, come on, come back. Oh, no, I missed it. But anyway, that's a general rundown on how to float fish our local lakes. The next technique I'm going to show you is a very common one, one that we use to fish off the bottom. Quite a popular technique for warmer weather, when those fish or anytime those fish are sitting on the near the bottom of the lake. So hang out for a bit. I'll re-rig here, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. All right, so this is another very popular technique for fishing on our local lakes. Fishing this sort of setup, no float on the end of my line here. We're fishing strictly off the bottom. So we might hear this as a bottom fishing rig, slip sinker sort of setup, slip sinker setup, or else most commonly known in the fishing world as a Carolina rig. So basically our weight's going to sit on the bottom. I've got my baited hook. My line is going to be reeled in tight to the weight, so there's not going to be any slack in between my rod tip and my weight. And we're going to sit this into a Berkeley spiral wire rod holder, which will help allow us to detect a bite. The beauty of this setup is when that fish bites, that line pulls through the center of the weight, and they're not going to feel that resistance unless they grab it really hard and pick that weight up, or they really grab that line and they start feeling the rod tip. So great for pressured fish. Also a really good way to fish when things warm up a little bit. With this setup, I very much like having a Berkeley power bait egg on my line, just because that is a floating bait and that will help bring that up off the bottom. Now that being said, I do catch a lot of fish using other types of baits, but this is definitely a preferred or a favorite of mine for this particular setup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast this guy out here. Not trying to get it across the lake, but getting a little bit of distance doesn't hurt. It's always fun to cast things far. And you can work it in just like with the float, comes in with the wind. We can reel this in a few casts every now and again, try and cover different depths and figure out where those fish are hiding. With this type of setup, it's not something that you want to reel in very slow, because it's going to drag across the bottom. And if there's any, logs, branches, big kind of rocky outcroppings, that can get caught up, and then you'll end up breaking it off more often than not. So if I want to change my positions, I will lift my rod tip, give it a couple of reels, and let it fall back down to the bottom. As you can see, I've got the rod in the spiral rod holder there, keeping it nice and secure on the bank. I've got my line tight to my weight, and I'm just going to be watching my rod tip for any action, and that's how I'm going to determine whether I'm getting a bite or not. So again, if you've been fishing for a little while, you're finding that you're not having any success, like I said earlier, by all means, you can move different spots around the lake. Great thing about Como Lake, it does have 2 public docks that you can access, one on either side of the lake, and there's lots of shore access as well. You can see these white floats in the water. This is marking off a wildlife protection area. So that's the one small little sliver of lake that we're not allowed to fish in. Just gives the birds somewhere to hang out without getting bothered. The only other real restrictions that you need to know about Como Lake, only allowed to retain 2 rainbow trout per day. Most lakes in the region, you are allowed 4, but because this is an urban lake that does get fished fairly heavily, we're only allowed to take 2. The other regulation to take note of, this is an electric motor only body of water, no gas motors allowed, but you can fish out of a boat, and you can fish out of a boat very successfully. So nothing's happening here. We're gonna pick that line up a little bit, reel, put that back in the rod holder, reel tight to that weight, and hope moving it in a few feet brings us a little bit better luck. And there you have a rundown on how to fish off the bottom. All right, so the third technique that I'm going to show you is casting and retrieving a small lure. So this is a 3/16 ounce Gibbs crock spoon. This has enough weight on its own that you don't need to add any weight to the line to cast this out. And these are very effective in triggering either a territorial response, either or a bite out of curiosity, or just a reaction strike. So the most active out of the setups that we have here, also the simplest to set up. So basically all I've done is I've just attached this lure directly to my main line. We're gonna cast that thing out there and reel it in. So things to consider when we're casting a lure like this, we wanna make sure that we have enough room around us without branches coming down or anything that we're gonna hang everything up in, lose our expensive lure. The other thing to think of is, again, covering different depths in the water. So when we cast this lure out, especially if we're on a dock, like I'm just on a little bit of a quieter spot here away from the docks, but like, one of the great things about the docks is you can access a little bit deeper water a little bit easier. So to cover different water depths, what I would do is I would cast that lure out, and a couple of times, the first few casts, or the first few times I reel it in, I'll let that lure sink down to the count of 1, and I'll start reeling in from there. If nothing happens, generally with something like this, if they're in the area and they want to take it, they'll take it pretty quick. So if I let that sink down for 1 second, nothing happens, I might try 2 seconds, I might try 3 seconds, I might try 4 seconds. Keep trying to repeat that same sort of depth for a few casts and see where those fish are. They'll let you know where they are. If they like that lure, they're gonna climb all over it. Obviously, you don't want this thing to hit the bottom. Again, just like trying to reel in that Carolina weight setup or that bottom rig, you can hang that up in the rocks or on a log or something like that, and we're gonna end up breaking our lure off. But basically, we're gonna cast this thing out, and we don't wanna crank it in as fast as we possibly can. I mean, we need to be able to reel it in at a reasonable speed to keep it off the bottom, but a speed that those fish are gonna wanna pursue that lure. If it's coming by ripping a million miles an hour, they're gonna go, whoa, what was that? If we give them a little bit of time, they might come check it out and climb on, but I'm gonna show you how it's done. So just hanging out on the water's edge here. I'm gonna watch out for the ducks. I'm gonna cast that lure out, let it sink for 1 second, and I'm just gonna slowly reel that in. And I can tell that that spoon's working properly because my tip is wobbling with the lure. If it was bouncing off the bottom, and especially if there's hard rocks and stuff down there, I'll feel that deflecting, and I'll know that I either want to lift my rod tip up a little bit more to bring it up in the water column or start reeling a little bit faster. So I've tried this a couple of times, only letting it sink for 1 second. 1, 2, 3. Let's let that get down a little bit deeper. I made that cast a little bit further. So remember with me, if I hook one on this one, it was a 3 second count. You know, if you're fishing with kids as well, this is a great way to keep them kind of a little bit more focused on the fishing. When you're throwing a setup off the bottom and just waiting for a rod tip or watching a float, they can lose interest. This way it kind of keeps them a little bit more active. One, two, three, four. And you can put little pops in your retrieve as well too. Play with things a little bit. That little bit of extra speed can entice a bite sometimes. There's no one right or wrong way to fish these things. Don't be afraid to mess around a little bit and just see what works for you. That was going into the no zone. And there you have 3 simple but very effective methods for fishing our local lakes like Como Lake and pursuing the rainbow trout that are stocked in here. Other species of fish in this lake as well. You could catch brown bullhead. There are common carp in here as well, some species of sunfish, and also goldfish of all things that people have released in here. Also not uncommon to catch a frog or a turtle sometimes, but it's not a lot of fun when that happens. Anyway, this is a video that I was hoping to do for you guys for a long time. Glad I got some weather for it today. I hope that you guys find it useful. I know there's not a lot of resources out there for fishing a lot of our local bodies of water. That's why I really wanted to do this one. But hope you find this one useful. You always know where to find us at the shop. Like I said before, Como Lake's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the front door of the tackle store. If you ever got any questions, need some tips or tricks, you know where to find us. If you want to purchase any of the equipment that you saw on the video, you can check us out online, www.c-run.com, and always more than welcome to come help you out at the shop. Hope to see you guys soon. Thanks for watching.